Welcome to another episode of Municipal Focus. My name is Kevin Tacci, and I will be your host. And today we've got a very special program. As you know, Municipal Focus, the title says it all. We try to talk about things that are important when it comes to town government, things that are going on in order to run a community. Joining me today is Whitman Town Administrator Frank Lynam, and he's here to kind of give us the nuts and the bolts of the upcoming special town meeting, December 11th, 7:30. It's going to be a very unique event, a number of different articles, 21 articles on this warrant. Welcome.
22, but who's counting?
22. How did that happen? I thought there were 21.
No, one counted 21 twice.
Oh, okay, all right. So you can't technically there's 22, but in actuality, there's 21, right?
No, in actuality, there is 22.
Oh, okay.
Just means that the 22nd article, misnumbered 21, will be corrected when it's voted.
All right. So we got an important special town meeting that is coming up. This is a multi-pronged town meeting. While we're talking about 22 articles, there are some key articles. We're talking about approving some town contracts, 4 town contracts.
Correct.
We're talking about discussing prohibition of the sale of recreational marijuana.
Correct.
We're talking about spending some money for, I think, a sewer pipe for the city on the Brockton-Whitman line, and also talking about doing a couple of projects that's going to entail replacing water gates and on Bedford Street, Route 18, at not only 18 at 24, 18 at 27. And 18 at 14?
14.
Yes. And new water meters.
Correct.
Did I miss anything? I mean, there are other.
Well, this is what I would probably best describe as a capital warrant, not by intent. Initially, when I requested the selectmen consider scheduling a town meeting, we had on our mind the approval of the 4 collective bargaining agreements.
Right.
That would be fire, library, police, and public works. And funding a sewer pipe break, the second in a year, and the cost of that repair is $445,966, which is a pretty significant number. When the warrant was opened, we were then presented with a number of other articles that had significant importance to the town and were ultimately placed on this warrant. So next Monday, December 11th, at 7:30, we will be convening a town meeting to address all of the articles on this warrant. I'm concerned about achieving a quorum. In order to do business, we need 150 voters to be present. The items that are on this warrant, I would consider, for the most part, essential. So I am sincerely hoping that we will get the turnout that we're looking for. And the interesting thing is where those articles sit. You talked about the sewer and water articles. We're looking for a vote to authorize a bond for $3,200,000. That bond will provide $1.5 million to replace the water gates, and those are the valves that control the primary flow of water to Whitman. At the pipe by Temple Street and Route 18, and at the pipe by Auburn Street and Route 18. The valves are over 100 years old, and the condition is such that if we ever had to control the flow, we doubt that we would be able to.
Wow.
So that's an important project. And the reason it's coming up now rather than in May when we would normally handle an appropriation like this is the state is modifying those intersections for traffic control. And we are actually going to contract with the Department of Transportation to make those changes. They'll subcontract the work out, but we'll be doing that while the road is opened. If we don't do that, then we become financially responsible for the repairs that would be necessary when we ultimately open the road to do that work. So that one was pretty simple. The 446,000, that's really a no-brainer. The sewer pipe ruptured, raw sewage spilled up. In Brockton, where our pipe runs to the sewer treatment plant, and we have the obligation to repair that and make good the conditions that existed when the pipe ruptured. Because of the age of that pipe was put in when sewer was first installed. We also are contracting with our engineers to evaluate that stretch of pipe and determine what we need to do to prevent future breaks, because in the last year now, we've had 2 breaks, and the cost of those 2 breaks is approaching $1 million. So we have to respond. We have to do what's necessary, and hopefully before the annual town meeting, so if additional work is needed, we'll be able to present those requests to the voters.
With the little more than $3 million that you're looking to bond, where does the water meter project fall? Is that also part of this?
Yes, there's $1.7 million, which will be committed to replacing water meters for the town. Now, it isn't simply the replacement of a water meter, it's the replacement of the metering system.
Right.
In addition to meters, there are some meters that have been put in the past few years that we won't have to replace, but we will have to replace the components that count water usage. Many of our meters are over 30 years old. It is estimated that we're losing between 20 to 25% of our counted water flow because these meters, being older, slow down and don't accurately measure water flow, which means in many cases we're underbilling water customers. That could have a potential value of as much as $200,000 to $250,000 a year, which is remarkably close to what the debt service will be to pay for that project.
Now, you had said during a recent selectmen's meeting that there's 2 different systems that you're looking at. One of them is where you can have a vehicle drive down the street and it will be able to capture the numbers as compared to another one, a standing system. Could you describe the 2 that
Sure.
you're looking at?
The mobile reader is essentially the meters will have a radio device on them that kicks out readings. It's very similar to a Bluetooth operation where your electronics are constantly signaling for and looking for a host. So in that system, we would have an employee drive down each street with a computer that will capture those readings. When all of that's done, the system will then compile usage and give us the ability to generate bills. Currently, it takes us 30 to 45 days to read because we actually have to go up to each house and touch the reader to the device that's attached outside the house in most cases. We do have a few radio reads, but not a significant number.
Right.
So that's one approach. The other approach is a fixed place system where we would place a, lack of a better word, an antenna, a receiver in the west side of town and one in the east side of town. And all of the meters would be providing readings through those two devices on an online real-time basis. The benefit of that system is that in addition to reading for billing purposes, we could continuously read to identify where there might be water leaks in the home that someone may not be aware of.
Sure.
It's not unusual for a customer, one or two a year perhaps, to get a water bill and find out that instead of the $300 they were expecting, it's $2,000 because they've had a leak running continuously for 6 to 7 months. This system would allow us to identify that, notify the resident, and actually go out there and assess it. So the benefit of that system is more information, but it comes at a price. It could be anywhere from $150,000 to $250,000 more than the drive-by system.
And that's kind of key, and I'm going to speak from personal experience because at my home, where I live, we have newer meters, and between our first quarter and second quarter bill, we noticed an increase. We're like, oh, what the hell is this? Come to find out, we had a leak. One of our in downstairs in the cellar, there was a leak. Unbeknownst to us, it was a drip. It was a simple drip on one of our outside faucets, but the system was able to catch it instead of it being something that would be extended. And also, it helps with conservation as well. So we were able to rectify that, get it fixed, and of course, our bill went back to normal. But we had that one quarter where it was a little bit higher because all that water was leaking out.
And that happens. It happens in a number of places. I remember before we tore the whole school building down, I received a water bill because the town buildings are also billed for sewer and water. And the bill was $1,700 and the building was unoccupied.
Oh my.
So I went out one Saturday morning and it was a quiet time. Nobody's in the building. I walked around, didn't see anything. Went down to the basement. I could hear the meter clicking. I walked over and looked, and sure enough, it was ticking off numbers. So I went up on the top floor and wandered through the various layers of the building. There you had rooms inside rooms inside rooms, and lo and behold, in what was a teacher's break room on the northwest side of the building, there was a toilet that was continuously running.
No.
The valve had been stuck. So it had been running, and fortunately, that was the short cycle. That was the 5-month cycle. It had been running for 5 months.
Wow.
So something like that would be
Waste all that
easily
water.
detected.
Right. So that's going to be an interesting article for folks to debate, but it's kind of it's an important one as well. And I know that usually there's a process that there have been town meetings where you gotta find where Whitman purchases their water from Brockton. So it's a matter of making sure that Whitman's numbers match up with Brockton's numbers.
Correct. That's something we cannot do right now. And every year when we complete our audited financial statement, one of the notes in the financial is the recommendation that we reconcile water sales to water purchases
Do that, right?
to identify that we are billing for the water we're purchasing, and we can't do that accurately right now. So which system we use will be dependent on a number of things. It'll be dependent on the evaluations that are made when we determine that it's time to go out and seek bids. The project will take approximately 12 to 16 months to complete once started. So it's a major undertaking.
We talk about this project. You talked about at the beginning it being a series of capital projects. I believe another capital project related to the Duval School, right?
Correct. We have last year appropriated $300,000 to pay for costs associated with repairing the Duval roof. In actuality, we appropriated $335,000. The $35,000 was to seek a consultant to go out and analyze essentially an architect that could look at things and say, okay, here are the conditions, here's what needs to be done. Ironically, it's the newer part of the Duval building that has the leaks. The original one, which was built in the late 40s, early 50s, is intact. The addition that was built in 2000 is leaking on 3 sides. And the cause is attributable to the way the ephes was constructed, the need for flashing where it didn't exist, water channels to divert water. And where we have a multi-level roof system, we actually have water coming down on a roof and dripping into a wall as opposed to outside because of the setback in the building.
Right.
So we're actually getting water in the classrooms and inside the walls. The estimate to repair this is $1 million. I believe the number is $1,037,000. The building commissioner, Bob Kern, and I have looked at the report and have looked at the scope of the project, and we have some concerns about whether this system is going to resolve all the problems and whether it's the best way to do it. It's an expensive repair. So what we're doing next week is we're asking the town to appropriate another $300,000. We want to break the project down into phases. And phase 1 will probably be the southeast side of the building or the front of the building where most of the leaks are occurring to determine if the proposed repairs will actually work. Unfortunately, this is not something that we can get help from the MSBA on because that work was constructed with MSBA funds, partially funded.
Right.
And there is a clawback if we do additional work or undo the work that was done before 20 years have expired.
And when you say clawback, that doesn't have anything to do with being careful of spending more than whatever the assessed value is, correct? That has
No,
nothing
it
to do
has
with
everything to do with the amount of money we were provided.
At that time by
time.
the Massachusetts School Building Authority.
And I believe that we received upwards of 72%
Okay.
for funding on that. And
Those are good times then.
you know, this was a major undertaking. We renovated the middle school, the Duval school, and the Conley school. And least amount of work was done on the middle school. But cumulatively, I believe it was over $25 million.
Okay. But if there was a clawback, that would come at the taxpayers would have to pay.
Yes, we would have to pay back MSBA for a portion of the money.
Okay. Let's turn to the elephant in the room. You know, one of the conversations. It's a couple. But recreational marijuana, that's something that
Yes.
you have a short amount of time to kind of get a gauge as to where the town stands regarding selling recreational marijuana. We know that earlier in the year, when the Board of Selectmen were pondering whether they wanted to give a note of approval to a company that wanted to come and have a medical marijuana grow facility. From that, what I gleaned was there was a lot of confusion with folks who were mixing up the whole recreational marijuana ballot question and the sale of recreational marijuana with growing medical marijuana. Is there any thoughts or any fears that there'll be some confusion with this?
That is correct. The confusion actually came from some well-intending folks who tried to offer an explanation that was inaccurate. Mm-hmm. Medical marijuana was passed in 2012.
Right.
The communities have not a lot of say in the medical marijuana program. The state in licensing medical marijuana facilities has taken into consideration whether or not a town supports a request to grow and or sell recreational marijuana. We held a series of meetings. The selectmen took the position that we were willing to entertain the growth of medical marijuana, but not the retail sale point. We held 3 meetings. We had a very small but vocal group of people that were opposed to marijuana of any type. And we tried to balance that issue with the need for medicinal marijuana.
Sure.
This time around, this is a result of the vote that occurred in 2016,
In November, yeah.
which legalized recreational marijuana in Massachusetts. Whitman voted, I believe the number was 54%, in favor of medical marijuana. Now, I don't know whether that vote meant, yes, we support the right of people to freely use marijuana, or yes, we support it and we want it in our town. I don't know that,
Right.
nor do the selectmen, nor does the state. So the state, in developing its regulations, included a provision that says if your town voted yes to recreational marijuana and you decide you do not want recreational marijuana in your town, you need to do a series of steps. You first need to have a town meeting, and at that town meeting, the majority of those attending would vote against allowing medical marijuana, and then you would have to hold a ballot, an election.
You mean recreational marijuana, right?
Recreational marijuana, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
And then
To make sure we don't confuse anybody.
you would have to hold a ballot question at an election prior to April 1st.
Right.
That where a majority of the voters say, no, we don't want recreational marijuana in Whitman. Right. And the possibility may be that they do. We don't know.
Right. So generally the idea of this is to get a gauge of the population here in Whitman, whether they want to allow or prohibit the sale of marijuana here, recreational marijuana here in town, and get a clear idea, hopefully before the rules and regulations are passed down by the state and the Cannabis Control Board, right?
Exactly. And this decision that's made at town meeting on December 11th will tell us which direction to go in. If a majority of those present vote to allow recreational marijuana, we're done.
Right.
If a majority vote to restrict or prohibit the sale of recreational marijuana in Whitman, then we move on to the next phase.
Which would be a ballot question.
Well, it would be, ironically, another town meeting with a zoning bylaw prohibiting the sale of marijuana, followed by a town election prohibiting the sale of marijuana. It's not the easiest thing to do. The presumption is if you voted for it, then you really have to demonstrate that you really didn't mean it. That's the way I read the
And is this going to be, is there a certain majority? So if let's say we have town meeting next Monday, December 11th, and you do have a majority that say we prohibit it. It doesn't have to be a 2/3 vote. It just has to be a simple majority. And then from there has to be did you say there's another town meeting, or there's a planning board meeting, or what happens?
If the vote is to allow recreational marijuana,
Yep.
the next step would be to send this information to the planning board so they can determine where the sales would occur, to zone it,
Okay.
to determine what zone those sales would be placed in. But if the town meeting says, no, we don't want recreational marijuana, then we need to go through the additional steps of another meeting and an election.
Oh, okay. So this could be very interesting.
Yeah, it is.
And what's even more interesting is there's another layer, the onion, you peel it back. We're going to have electronic voting devices.
Correct. In our meeting last year, town meeting voted to amend the bylaws to permit electronic voting, not to establish it, but to permit it. And it is up to the town meeting to determine whether or not we wish to implement it. There was funding provided for us to hold an electronic voting town meeting and to determine at that point whether or not to proceed with it in the future. The idea of the electronic voting is, and I'll give you an example. I received a call a couple of weeks ago from a lady who is very concerned about recreational marijuana. And she wanted to know why we were holding a meeting. The town has already spoken. I said, well, we're not sure. Well, I think it's going to be terrible because I'm going to have to go there and I'm going to have to show my opinion to the other people voting. And I suspect this is someone who may have been in favor of it, but may not have wanted other people to know. So I explained to her that, no, we're actually going to have little calculator type devices which will allow each member of town meeting to vote yes or no on each article.
Right.
What'll happen is the article will be read as it's normally done. Question will be displayed on the screen, and you'll have 10 seconds to hit 1 if you want to vote yes, and 2 if you want to vote no.
Right.
And then the calculations will be tabulated. Sometimes we require a 2/3 vote. And whenever you require a 2/3 vote, you have to count the number of voters to satisfy the document that you reached 2/3.
Right.
This system will tell us instantly what the voting was.
Right. And if for some reason you're somebody who's like 1 minute you're like, oh, I want to vote no. You can hit the button 4 times. What it'll do is it'll record your last vote at that 10th second.
At the 10th second, it will take the last vote cast on that device.
Right. Now, when you check in to vote to be a part of town meeting, I believe that's where you'll receive a receipt.
Yes, and interestingly, checking in is also going to be electronic this year.
Ooh.
Anyone who's come to town meeting is used to seeing checkers sitting there with this huge pad with everybody's name and address on it and flipping through the pages to find your name and check it.
That'll be sped up.
Well, we're going to have laptops this year that are going to have all of the information available, so we'll actually be able to bring the name up, check it, and it will print a little ticket to show that you've been checked in and registered for that meeting.
Right.
It won't tell us how you vote. We have, and I want to be clear on this, there is nothing in this process that will identify how people vote or what they're doing. It's simply a counting system.
We got less than a minute left. This is your opportunity to tell those folks in that camera why it's important for them to be at town meeting and have a quorum to decide some of these articles.
Every town meeting requires a quorum. Town meeting is our local legislative body. It's the people in Whitman who get to choose how we spend every dollar and how much we spend and what direction the community takes. Your vote counts, but we need you there in order to count it.
Thank you very much for coming in. And if you don't know, go to the Whitman Town of Whitman website to find out more information as the warrant. All 22 articles on the warrant are on the website. It's easy enough. As you see, we're flashing it up here on the screen at this moment. Get out. Be there on December 11th, Whitman Town Hall Auditorium, 7:30. Till next time, have a great day.